what I'd like to do is move into our discussion portion. This is where we'd really like all of our participants to weigh in, and please either just raise your hand or put a question into chat. But what we've got here for you is essentially a summary of the key actions that all of the work groups have come up with. Thank you, Teresa, for putting this together so quickly. You know, it represents 11 action items across residents and families, staff, and leadership. And, you know, to get the conversation going, we thought we'd put up a couple of polls. And I would direct your attention to that orange box in the top right-hand of corner of your screen. That box is a reminder of what the main criteria were that we gave the work groups as an assignment to consider each of these actions from the point of view of urgency, feasibility or difficulty, and relevance to advancing excellence. And I would extend that actually to our broader community, because so many of you can, you know, join this army that is to take action on these questions. So what I'm going to do is put some polls up. The first one is a question about urgency. And what you have is the opportunity to select the top 3 of these. There's actually 10 of these of actions. So please take a few minutes, and I want to in particular give Maurice time. He reminded us yesterday that it takes him a bit longer to respond to these questions when they're put up on the screen. So take some time to respond to the poll.
I appreciate that, Chris.
Absolutely, Maurice.
Chris, do you want us to be answering part 1, part 2, and part 3?
Let's have you answer all 3 of them. Yes.
Okay.
Because there's then we can at least get a temperature of how the group is feeling about each of these things. So please take a few minutes, take 3 or 4 minutes, take 5 minutes. If you want, we've been working you hard. So if you, once you've answered the questions, if you want to, you know, go get a bio break or get a glass of water or just stretch, because we've been at this a while, please do that. And once we get everybody into the poll, we'll look at the answers to that, and we'll get into some discussion. All right, I see a few answers coming in. Very good. All right, we've got about half of the group responding. How are you doing, Maurice?
Getting there.
All right, take your time. We got lots of time. All right, we're getting close.
This is Teresa. Chris, that was difficult.
Didn't know you'd have to work, right? It's
Yeah.
a working conference, folks. It's hard to make these choices because they're all so important. And it's really just a way to get the sense from the group of, how we need to proceed.
Well, and I think we'll have some time to talk about what might be missing from this list too, right?
We should absolutely ask that question, yes. I think there's a submit button at the bottom of the poll if any of you are having difficulty submitting. You may have to scroll down to see it. Answers are interesting. Has everyone who's going to responded? Maurice, are you doing okay?
Yeah, almost done.
Very good. I'll also be interested to see how the general responses compare to each of the work groups' feelings about these. I'm sure you all had that discussion. And Maurice, just let us know when you're ready and I'll close the poll.
Thanks very much, Chris. I submitted mine.
Very good. Yes, I see it. And I think all those who are going to vote have voted. So I'm going to end the poll at this point and we can start looking at the results. So question 1, what is the most urgent of these actions? The 3 that were selected were firstly to collect stories. Stories have been really the theme of this meeting. And clearly a very powerful way for us to move things forward. So I definitely agree with that. Secondly, promote education on person-centered care, implicit bias, cultural competence, as we just heard person-centered care is not the same as racial equity. Cultural competence gets to it, but education obviously is an empowering vehicle for us to make improvements here. The third priority is to advocate for measures, policies, research related to racial equity, and engage in projects to develop these. So that's a really interesting set of responses. I guess a pretty close fourth is to schedule follow-up activities to continue the conversations. Of course, we don't want things to end here. We want them to continue. So I'm going to pause at this point and get some discussion going. How do you all feel about these three most urgent actions?
Chris, I missed the third one.
The third one was to advocate for measures,
policies, and research.
policies, research. Yes.
Are you able to share the poll results so we can see how people?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's. Thank you for letting me.
I didn't know if you were deliberately keeping us in the dark.
I am not deliberately keeping you in the dark. So now you can see them for yourself. To collect stories, to promote education, and to advocate were the top three. And as I said, there's a close fourth, which is to keep this going after we finish up today.
So Chris, this is Barb Bowers. We had not identified collecting stories in the staff work group, but I think it applies just as well. I mean, stories are compelling, and the stories of the lives of CNAs, the work life, personal life, how those two things intersect, I think would be quite powerful.
Indeed. Any other thoughts? Is there anything that we missed? I'm going to ask that question each time this comes up.
Well, I'll just say it's kind of tricky with this way of ranking, having to select, only three for urgency in each section, and I almost wish we could rate each of those characteristics for all of these, and then look at a sum score for them.
If we had, I think we have a researcher on the call with us, right, Serena? If we had a more complex polling mechanism, we would absolutely do that. And perhaps one thing we could do is put up a Survey Monkey after the conference that does exactly that. And because I think we have a little bit more complexity in terms of our the way we ask questions on the Survey Monkey. This is pretty rudimentary. It's just like multiple choice or single choice. That's what you get.
I don't want us to lose the focus kind of within each of these subgroups. Obviously really important to focus on the resident specific ones, but
this is Cece. One thing to note is that this is just sort of a preliminary for discussion purposes.
Yeah.
The board's going to look at this. A lot's going to depend. There's so many, it's so fluid, right? How many people do we have who are interested in helping? Which partners are interested in helping? Hopefully we'll be able to knock out a lot of this.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what's important as we're discussing this is that collecting the stories is not effective if we don't share them as well. So that and so we not only need to collect them, but there needs to be a mechanism of sharing them, not just within the collaborative, but sharing them with those people who will benefit the most. That means sharing them with other staff members, letting them know that they're not alone, sharing them with other residents, letting them know that they're not alone, sharing them among the groups so they can understand, maybe I need to ease off on a staff member because they're suffering just as much as I am. So I think it should be collect and share.
It's a very good point.
Rather than just collect.
Yeah.
Collecting does nothing if we're not doing something with it.
And in fact, Maurice, to your point, it really affects the other two as well to promote education. Much of that education will consist of the real stories from folks' experience. And clearly we can advocate, but advocating with a human face is way more effective than just kind of saying, we'd like you to do this change. The stories are what make the advocacy effective. And we've all seen that, those of us who are in advocacy positions. So I think probably one of our follow-ups is to not only collect those stories, but also share them. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sure this is my fault in terms of the logistics of this, but increased salary sort of got buried in this. And I just want to make sure that I don't know what we can do. I mean, there were a few suggestions, but that was clearly at the top of the list for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, and I see nested it kind of within the work groups, it looks like, and engaging partners. But I agree, Barbara, I think that we out of that.
So
Yeah.
one question I had, Barb, was when we're talking about increasing salaries, what's the advancing excellence action to do so, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think that's the big challenge, is what can this group do?
Right. And there were a couple suggestions. I mean, one was to have a look at the structure of how salary is allocated. And there's a real fairness question. There were suggestions about leveling certification, different levels of certification. Obviously, it's internal. We're not going to change state law probably, but to compensate CNAs for increasing levels of clinical skill, knowledge, competence. And then there were, one of the things that we talked about was there are a number of people who've written white papers and different sorts of things related to salary and the impact on turnover, which is very expensive, but to partner with the several other groups that are also working on that issue, so that we're not all doing it sort of piecemeal by ourselves. Obviously, that's a tougher one to deal with, but there is pretty good data about the cost of turnover. You could probably hire a couple CNAs for the cost of turnover, assuming that you invest something in your staff. So I think certainly it's not advancing excellence alone that can do this, but I think we can contribute to it, participate in it, and certainly increase awareness. The staff turnover and inability to recruit is certainly getting people's attention right now.
Yeah. And not only is it expensive, but it leads to worse outcomes.
Exactly.
And this is Lori, and I want to just build on what you just said, Barbara, and that when I was looking at these questions and what should this organization do versus partner with others, I was thinking about, so what is the task and who are the best people to do it? And because I'm in an academic setting, that's, I was thinking about what's, what are the best ways of partnering with people who do research, for example. And so even though, as Teresa said, I had some very strong views about needing to do mixed methods research and collect stories from residents and families and staff, I didn't rate that one highly for the organization to do. I rated highly partnerships with others who are researchers to do that. So
I would agree. And I think the first step is to find out what research has been done, because it's sort of scattered around. We do have something out there, and individual organizations have collected their own data on things. So I think that's a place to start.
Absolutely.
And that gets to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Good research builds on what's already been done. And so that's the first step, is figuring out, how not to reinvent the wheel.
That's exactly the point I was going to try to, moving from a bunch of independent pilots to consolidating the knowledge and promoting what we already know.
And I guess, I don't know if this is the group, but someone needs finally to show that with 40% of the deaths from COVID being in nursing homes, and that with the large percentage of the introductory points coming from staff, that with the large percentage of staff who are so poorly paid that they have to have 2 and 3 jobs, that if you increase the salaries, you reduce the number of jobs that they have, and thereby reduce the possibilities of them of them you reduce the snowflake effect, whereby they you reduce the number of exposure points, and you reduce the number of reduce the likelihood that they get infected and they infect the residents of the communities they serve. In other words, when you have staff members so poorly paid that they have to expose themselves in multiple points, of course you're going to be able to more likely expose the residents of facilities. And of course, you're going to leave the residents more susceptible to COVID. So there's a direct correlation to low salaries and COVID deaths in facilities. And someone needs to bring that research out.
It's an excellent point.
So this is Lori again, and I found a video that was just recently, and Chris, you may know about this, but it was done by the Jewish Healthcare Foundation, which I was not familiar with them, and the video just came out, and it's about what have we learned about long-term care from COVID, and how it is just, I mean, I'm not saying anything that we don't all know, which is it's only pointing out to us all of the problems that are long-standing, but now everyone knows about it. And this video was a very effective means of getting across important points, all of the things we're talking about. People like Mark Cohen were speaking in it, Terry Fulmer, who is the head of the Hartford Foundation. And if you haven't seen it, I will forward it to you. I just saw it last night. Great way of communicating about these points.
Yeah, please forward that,
Yeah.
Lori.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
if
Lori,
you have
if
you have
you
the
can
link,
access it and put the link
put the link in the
in the
chat.
chat, then everybody can have access to it.
Right
Yeah, let
away.
me do that now.
Okay. So I think that may be enough discussion for the first question. So let's move on to the second, which really has to do with relevance. And the question here is, so what actions are the most relevant to advancing excellence and I'd say the wider community? Really, there's one standout here, which is to schedule follow-ups. And I think we're clearly talking about doing that in various ways. I would say that probably the next highest, it's a tie between, in terms of the percentages, a tie between advocacy and engaging partners.
Chris, can you
Certainly,
sorry, could you show the poll?
You can,
We're not,
you can scroll yourself.
oh, okay, I see actions from each work group on the screen, sorry.
yeah, I think you have to scroll down, Kathy. So if all
Thanks.
you're seeing are the first question, scroll down and you'll see the second one. I don't think I can make this window bigger.
No,
Wait.
each person can make it bigger on their own screen.
And if the poll window isn't popping up for you, just click polls down on the bottom.
Right.
Got it, thank you, that did it.
Okay. Good. Well, so we're seeing essentially the scheduling follow-up, and then, these two, other clearly relevant ones for advancing excellence, advocacy, and engaging partners is what we do. So I think that's kind of obvious. And then, if there's a third, or rather a fourth one, it seems to be this forming work groups to explore best practices to increase salaries, as we just discussed, reduce the plantation mentality, improve training, conduct research. That's going to take, I think, more of a broad-based engagement of people to get all that done, but clearly an important element. So what do you all think about this, these answers and the question of relevance?
Guess I was a little bit surprised to see how far down stories dropped in relevance, because that still seemed to me to be, you know, really relevant to our mission and a key for our, you know, what we helps us be effective in our advocacy. So I guess that was kind of surprising to me, but on the other hand, it was just kind of hard to answer these questions. So maybe I shouldn't make too much out of that.
I think this sort of goes back, this is Nancy Kusmal. I think this sort of goes back to Lori's previous comment about what is the most effective thing for advancing excellence to do versus what needs to be done more broadly. And as somebody just said, it, you know, bringing people together is what advancing excellence does. So when, at least for me, when I answered this question, scheduling the follow-up activities of bringing people together was the most relevant for advancing excellence. I'm also a researcher, so the collecting the stories, doing the research would be relevant to me, but you know, I was looking at this as what is relevant to this group.
Yeah.
I wonder if Maurice's comment also played a role, because he hadn't yet made it when we did the voting, which is that collect stories and then do what with them. Mm-hmm. It could be that without a direct idea of what we would be doing with these stories as advancing excellence, it felt less relevant. Whereas if we're collecting stories to advocate for measures, policies, and research, which was one of the top two here, then maybe it feels more relevant as a part of that context.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think collecting stories and best practices go very much hand in hand, because you're going to bring people together. It's those stories and those best practices that they need to understand and know to help create a vision for collectively for people.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good point, Jen.
And it gets back to me, there are, you know, some of our members are locked and loaded and very capable of collecting the stories, you know, so where it isn't necessarily something advancing excellence as an entity would be putting a call out for necessarily. It is something that several of our member organizations could and should be doing if they aren't already.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point of the kind of who does this, you know, who's collecting the stories, and a really important opportunity to draw upon, you know, collaboratives that already exist. You know, we talked a lot about leaning on the state coalitions for Pioneer Network. And I know in my work, I'm part of the Oregon state chapter, and we've talked exactly about this of collecting stories, you know, to highlight the work of, you know, frontline workers in times of COVID. And I think, you know, if we could take a specific focus on racial inequities, it would be timely and important. And, you know, there are people already gathering who can do this work. And I think if we provide a framework and kind of a platform, it, you know, it seems like low-hanging fruit to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are so many of the things we've talked about are sort of sporadically occurring all over. And one of the challenges we have here, which is also a nice opportunity, is to pull those people together and work on it. I mean, there's a lot of people we can partner with out there. Yeah. And I think in many instances, we aren't necessarily taking the lead.
And again, I mean, all of these comments make so much sense to me, and it is a matter of finding out, of deciding who has what expertise to do these tasks. And just as an example, I mean, I think the power of stories is so central. I don't think any of this work can happen without the stories. And yet, like I said, I didn't put that, you know, high on the priority list for the organization to do. It's a matter of partnering and, you know, again, using stories as an example, working with researchers who have the skills to do that. because, not everyone, not everyone knows how to put it in the context of building on research and doing it in a way that is, that's going to be effective. Policy research.
Yeah, I'm also reminded that there are some models for this. I don't know how many of you are NPR listeners. I'm a loyal NPR listener, and of course every Friday they do StoryCorps, right? And that's very much a situation where people can sit down with another person and record a short piece about an experience in their life. That's something we could do relatively easily. There's software out there that's easily downloadable onto a smartphone that is essentially broadcast quality audio, and we can post those to the Advancing Excellence website. And if nothing else, it would be an exercise in community building. But I think it would also provide a sort of a base of information that we can use when we're trying to advocate for some change, or to really illustrate a point we're trying to make around things like salaries, or things like respect, or career ladders, or any of these things. So if that's something that you all would like to do, we should take that back and explore how to make that happen.
I like that idea. And I think, collaborating, as was said earlier, there are other organizations that do this, but maybe Advancing Excellence can help create a sort of a clearinghouse
Right.
for those that are collected by a lot of the other kinds of organizations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And help connect the stories with action too,
Yes.
with that policy focus that we have, and then leveraging our membership, where my brain is, quality measures as always, leveraging our membership to share and disseminate and promote those stories.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the time and thinking, we need to get into this third area here, which is the capacity, feasibility, or ease question. And I put it in a way that I thought was a little bit more helpful than just asking about feasibility, which is, what do you think we could do quickly? Because easy wins, or rather quick wins, are important for sort of giving people hope and moving conversations forward. A very clear winner here to schedule follow-up activities to continue the conversation. Although there are two others that that stand out, right? The collecting stories, we've just spent a lot of time talking about that, and forming work groups to move some of this forward. So what other things do you think, or do you agree with these? I mean, are these the right ways for us to go about some, quick things to sort of get on the board and say, this is what we're doing, and so perhaps attract others to the effort? Again, don't forget to scroll down so you can see all the answers.
Can I ask a question? This is Rosemary up here. Am I off?
Yeah.
Oh, when this summit was organized, what kind of change were you hoping would result from the efforts of these 3 days?
Well, again, I would say the overarching effort was, or outcome was, to improve or mitigate, to reduce the degree to which racial inequities have an impact on our residents, on our staff, and to really kind of engage and empower leaders to help make that happen. So,
okay, because that's what I signed up for. That's what I thought we were doing.
That's what.
And I think part of this conversation, incremental change, which it'll happen. I think there's a real potential here, as I listened to everything that's been said, there's a real opportunity, not advancing excellent doesn't have to take the burden of all of this, but through partnerships to really make substantial inroads, not just talking about it and doing more research and gathering stories and telling stories. I'm talking about having an impact where we make deep inroads and get this ball moving. I've been at this for over 30 years, and I know some people on this call have been at this like 50 years. And it's like, we've done this. We've done so much of this, and I'm really ready to step up the game and do something a little more impactful. I don't want this to end up on a shelf where we collect stories, and stories are powerful. Feed them to the work groups.
Yeah.
Those work groups can use the stories to influence policy, for use in the trainings. I think it all can fit together. All these things can fit together, but where we can do something a little more.
Right. I agree with you, Rosemary. I think we didn't have enough time to get to some of that sort of nitty gritty. What are the actions we're actually going to take, and where is that going to lead in specifically? But that's a really important question. Like, what are we going to do with this, and how is that actually going to improve something on a fairly grand scale, not just one or two places?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all with you.
And in terms of having a lot of impact, taking those stories to policymakers at the federal as well as state and local levels. That's where you can make a lot of change.
Yeah, one of the advantages our group has is it's like, I don't know, 12, 14, how many organizations we have that have not always gotten along well. They've been kind of at odds. And I think, what we've been able to do is to work as a collaborative group, and we can represent all the factions that, like CMS will say, yes, but what is this group going to think? And so I think if we do it together as a collaborative with all the support of the rest of the folks here, we do get an audience. They do listen. I mean, we've engaged CMS on a number of occasions. We've had some impact, not as much as we'd like, but there's potential.
And I think the more we do this collectively, I think the more of an impact we can have.
And to that point, Chris, I wonder if we can spend a minute talking about, we've got a lot of people on the call who are relatively new to this collaborative and may want to continue being involved and get involved. For those of you who don't know, we're primarily a volunteer organization. So we all have other full-time jobs and kind of put this conference together in our spare time in many cases, because we think it's so important. So I know we're looking to expand our membership with other people who want to roll up their sleeves and actually do the work.
And there's a number of people on this in this group who we would love to have join us.
No question.
This is Jay. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I reflect back a couple of years ago when Dave Gifford said at an Advancing Excellence board meeting that this is the only place he could go to have a conversation with Consumer Voice, that he could have a conversation with so many other organizations that are part of our organization. And then just last week on a call with CDC, we heard the same thing from them. They wanted to speak to our membership because otherwise they were going to have to go through all the different silos to have conversations with people. What we do best, Rosemary and others, is bring people together to have these conversations. And then if we can reach consensus on what we want to do, we can do things, of course. And if we can't, then some people don't go along with the Advancing Excellence agenda. But so the point that I'm trying to make is this is truly a collaborative where we work together. It's an entirely volunteer organization, other than some support from Carol. And we welcome your membership. We have academics here, we have trade associations, we have companies, we have researchers. There are so many other examples. We have consumers and representing staff. So we really encourage you and invite you to join and continue in this conversation with us.
Please.
Good. I am very hopeful that that we can do this. So I think this final question here is, what organizations, individuals, and tactics? I think we've covered these questions, but it's just a reminder. What are the barriers and facilitators? I think again, we know what the barriers are. Facilitators, in my mind, are conversations just like this with a large mixed group of stakeholders that can, basically get their teeth into things. And finally, is there potential for unintended consequences for any of our approaches? I would say to you, there are always potentials for unintended consequences. And, the more we can think from a 360-degree point of view with the diversity that this group represents, I think the more success we can have.
This is Rosemary again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be talking so much.
All right.
This just struck me when the third bullet. I think an unintended negative consequences that can come from our approaches is this. Again, as I listened to the three days and the three different work groups talking, I have a filter as I listen for culture change, for transforming the culture. I mean, that's the lens I see the world in, and transforming these
You're breaking up.
You're cutting out, Rosemary.
Oh, nuts.
Yeah, no,
I'm
we can hear
sorry.
you.
Well, that's annoying. Okay, so that was a golden thread for me to hear that throughout all the 3 days together. And I don't want us to lose. I think this work is too important that we hang on to the importance of we're talking about
You're breaking up, Rosemary.
culture.
Yeah.
And as we look at cultures being an integral part of this work in every aspect of our approaches and our efforts, that we keep the culture as an integral part. Did that get all broke? You probably didn't hear a word I said.
No, we did.
We heard you.
We did.
Okay.
We appreciate it. All right.